So over the weekend, the federal conservatives have climbed up in the polls, and now they are actually in the lead officially. And if the election were held today, there would be a conservative minority. There are also some polls and some people saying that the conservatives are within striking distance now to a majority. The only conclusion that I can come to with why this would be the case here in Canada is because fascism is popular. That fascism has become the prevailing ideology in our society, that we want fascism to rule, we want fascists to take over, and we want to be led by fascists. Before you think I'm being hyperbolic, we have seen the entire campaign season, these entire last few years that Aaron O'Toole has been in power, he's been walking around using the Ku Klux Klan slogan, Canada First, which was also used by the white supremacist Donald Trump. We have seen him release tweets which follow a Nazi slogan formula, the 1488 slogan formula. We have seen him allow his MPs donate money and take out ads in a newspaper run by a racial purity cult. These are things that we have witnessed coming out of the Conservative Party, not to mention the exposés that have been done on literal Nazi white supremacist groups such as Canada First, which exists here in Canada. The Conservative Party has, at the very least, has an enormous white supremacy movement going on within it, and it seems genuinely that Canadians don't seem to care about that at all. They don't seem to care even a little bit that there is a white supremacist movement that is sweeping through the Conservative Party so dramatically that the leader is openly using white supremacist slogans in order to shore that base up. And then on top of that, you have former leader and still very influential former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, saying things like he wants to protect Anglo-Western culture, particularly Anglo-Western culture, right? Well, what is particularly Anglo-Western culture, do you figure? What do you think he's talking about there? This gets me into thinking, and it just seems as though the populace is completely fine and completely accepts all of this. That when you bring it up, it's with this sort of shrugging, apathetic, like, oh well, what are you going to do? White supremacy, right? But more and more I'm seeing that not only do people genuinely not care about the fact that the party has been taken over by white supremacists, but I actually think that they are starting to see that as a positive, that they're starting to see that as a net good, because Canadians have told everyone what it is they care about. We've done the polling, we have the data, we have the information, right? We have all of this stuff. 92% of us want to raise taxes on the wealthy. Well, which party is running somebody? Which party is running somebody that's actually saying we need to raise taxes on the wealthy? Well, that's actually the NDP. But the NDP can't get any votes. And in the meantime, Jagmeet Singh is seen as the most popular, most likable leader, but he can't get any votes. And so what you have is you have a nation of people who are obviously picking up their phone and going, yeah, no, I like Jagmeet Singh. I'm not a racist. Never going to vote for him, right? That's quite seriously the situation we find ourselves in. That I'm beginning to see that during Justin Trudeau's blackface scandal, that the reason why he declines in the polls and the reason why he gets a minority government is not because of the blackface scandal, it's because he apologized for it. That if he had have stood up and said, well, what are you going to do? That would have been it, and they probably would have walked on to another majority government. That the reason why Canadians repelled from Justin Trudeau as a blackface prime minister is not because he did blackface. It's because he apologized for it. Instead of doing what a good Canadian would have done, which is simply shrug and say, oh yeah, things happen. Because that's the true face of Canada, and we're seeing it now. That the white supremacy aside, Canadians want their healthcare system privatized. That's very obvious. Canadians are not interested in fighting climate change. That's very obvious. Canadians are not interested in confronting wealth equality. That's very obvious, right? We are not actually genuinely interested in doing any of these things. We are interested in swinging towards a white supremacist party who is actively talking about dismantling the civil society to the ground in order to benefit a small group of billionaires. This is called neoliberalism. This is what the Conservatives are attempting to conserve. And more, I'm beginning to see that the heart of what's going on is that over the course of this pandemic, there were people who have worked the entire pandemic, and there are people who were laid off or who have gone home and stayed hunkered down over this pandemic. And these two groups are at odds with one another, but not because the people who worked are saying, hey, maybe we should work less too. Maybe we should have some benefit given to us. Maybe something good should happen for the people who are forced to work throughout a pandemic. Maybe that's the way that we should be talking about this. No, it looks as though the white supremacist Conservatives are sweeping people up with a narrative of vengeance that says, hey, those people got handouts, we should put them back to work. And of course, this is completely detached from any reality that anyone is familiar with, that the capitalist neoliberal economy is collapsing, if it hasn't already collapsed. It's not providing the jobs for people. People are working 2-3 jobs in order to pay their bills. A full-time job here in the city of Toronto no longer allows you to pay your bills. And none of these things are going to be addressed by the Conservatives. And yet, we're plowing towards them. And the only answer that I can genuinely come up with for why this would be the case is because fascism is popular. We want to spread suffering. We want people to suffer. It's becoming clearer and clearer that Canadians want people to suffer. That we know that housing the homeless, we know that feeding the hungry, we know that these things are cheaper. We're well aware of it. We're well aware of it. And yet, we continue to plunge people into poverty and homelessness and then pay for cops to beat them up. That seems reasonable to the Canadian people. That paying more to inflict people who have already fallen into homelessness with more suffering makes sense because fascism is popular. Not only is fascism popular, it's the most popular prevailing ideology today. That this election is really setting the table to make leftists, even centrists, even liberals understand exactly how desperately degenerate the populace actually is. That the populace wants fascism. It's calling out for fascism. It demands fascism. And when they elect the fascists, they will hide behind a shield, so maybe they'll raise disability, right? It is in their platform, maybe they will. And then hiding behind that shield, they will abandon enormous sections of the populace. They will destroy the CERB, the CRB, which they never wanted to see in place in the first place. They will hand billions and billions of dollars to the billionaire class. And when people are evicted from their homes and when the mass suffering begins, they'll just shrug and laugh and say, you must be lazy, get a job. That's the future that Canadians are heading for, because that's the future that Canadians want. They want that future. They don't like the idea of a free society, even though they say they do. They don't like the idea of a supported populace. They don't like the idea that people are taken care of, that the society is stable. No. Freedom means selling yourself to billionaires who abandon you the second you're not profitable. That's what freedom means to these fascists. And they are fascists. And it turns out that we actually do need to put the fork in the light socket, that it doesn't matter how much you tell them about the history of our own country, the history of the Conservative Party, the history of neoliberalism. None of that matters. They genuinely need to take the fork and put it in the light socket. It's a sad time to be living here in Canada, to watch Canadians turn to fascism, to watch Canadians turn to the abandonment of the populace. And it's disappointing to see the Liberals capitulate, as Liberals do. This is the classic Liberal narrative, that when fascism is on the rise, Liberals do not fight back. Liberals bend the knee and capitulate. And that's exactly what these Liberals are going to do. They're not going to fight to keep people off the streets. They're not going to fight to alleviate poverty. They're not going to do any of that. They're going to bend the knee and watch as the Conservatives wipe people out. And don't pretend like it can't happen. We're seeing it happen throughout the United States. We're witnessing it happen throughout the United States. It's already happening there. And it seems to me like Canadians have decided, oh, that's what we want here as well. Well, this is the end of this video, guys. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe. Try to convince people not to vote Conservative, but it is like a cresting energy. People are calling out for fascism. They demand it, they desire it. We need to abandon the populace. It seems to be built in to the structure of our society. We have to abandon the populace. We certainly can't help people and pay less to do it. Can't do that. Well, and if you'd like to help this channel out, I have a Patreon down below. I could use $1. Like everyone, I have bills to pay. For some reason. Alright guys, good luck. We're gonna need it.